The truth of the matter is that I went into it for the wrong reasons. I went into it because I thought lawyers made a lot of money. I discovered in building my own practice that I loved. I got so much more professional fulfillment out of building a practice than I actually did practicing law.
Welcome to Between the Briefs, a podcast by Steno. We're here to bring you practical tips, expert insights, and real conversations about the pretrial process, court reporting, and the legal technology shaping the future of litigation. I'm your host, Adrian.
And I'm your host, Joe Stevens. Whether you're an attorney, paralegal, or just curious about how technology is changing the legal industry, we've got something for you. Each episode will break down complex topics, share behind-the-scenes intel, and talk to the people leading innovation in and out of the courtroom. So grab a coffee and let's get into what's happening between the briefs.
Hello and welcome to Between the Briefs, brought to you by Steno. We're your hosts. My name is Adrian.
And I'm your co-host, Joe Stevens.
In today's episode, we're excited to welcome Scott C. Pappas, the firm-wide managing partner at Omnus Law. Scott brings over 2 decades of experience in law practice management and has a unique perspective on how technology is transforming the legal landscape. Omnus Law is a pioneering firm leveraging cutting-edge technologies like AI and the metaverse to redefine the legal industry and enhance both the attorney and client experiences.
Scott's background is incredibly diverse, from his leadership role at Omnus Law to his previous experience at Goodwin and Lowenstein Sandler. He has also founded Autism Behavioral Wellness, where he applies his passion for inclusivity to a different field. Today, we're going to dive into how Scott's innovative approach is shaping the future of law.
Scott, welcome to the show. It's great to have you with us here today. How are you doing?
So thank you. What a warm introduction. Thank you so much, Joe and Adrian. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm doing well. I'm excited to chat with you both.
Fantastic, man. So let's just get right into it. Tell us, what got you into law and really kickstarted your career and where you're at today?
You know, I've wanted to be a lawyer from as long as I can remember, and the truth of the matter is that I went into it for the wrong reasons. I went into it because I thought lawyers made a lot of money, and at the time, growing from humble beginnings, I thought that was a path to a better life. Now, coincidentally or serendipitously, I fell into a career that I absolutely loved. I just happened to enter it for the wrong reasons. So I went to law school. I went to college knowing that I was going to go to law school. And then I clerked for a judge. And I joined ultimately a large litigation firm. And I recognized that it was a great experience and I was doing well. And it was a firm that was giving young associates a lot of great experience. But partnership at that firm wasn't really my brass ring. And I just had this entrepreneurial kind of urge to build my own practice and build my own firm. And so I wound up joining another attorney. I left that firm. I wound up joining a solo practitioner who went to become a judge. And I discovered in building my own practice that I loved. I got so much more professional fulfillment out of building a practice than I actually did practicing law. So that was a start of kind of this journey where I can say, look, maybe there's a way I could build a career around the business of law while still practicing, but primarily focusing on scaling practices and growing practices. And from that, I was given an opportunity at Lowenstein, and it was a really interesting start to a very non-traditional journey in law.
Scott, I don't think this was really going to be my first question, but you said something really interesting there. Yeah, starting with a financial motivation. This is a path out of wherever or to a better life financially.
Sure.
And then that shifted to realizing that your purpose was not financially driven. When you talk to young lawyers now, or when you talk to people who are thinking about going to law school or choosing between jobs, how do you advise them to navigate the whole purpose versus sort of money conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, I tell law students, if you live like a lawyer when you're a student, you're going to live like a student when you're a lawyer. And that's absolutely true. But you have to go into the practice for the right reasons, because you're going to be spending a lot of money in tuition. You're going to be spending a lot of time. And I will tell you, the novelty of the money wears off when you're miserable at your desk. And that's something that is a sobering thought. Look, I mean, I have the good fortune of speaking with a lot of lawyers in just just in mentoring roles as well as growing on this. But you have to do things for the right reasons. If you do things for the right reasons, the right results will certainly come to pass. If you do things, for the wrong reasons, you're going to get the wrong results. And you see a lot of disenchanted lawyers who aren't disenchanted with the practice. They may be disenchanted with how they're practicing or where they're practicing, but and that's a great kind of premise. I mean, that was one of the premises upon which we founded Omnus Law. So I think it's a key message that I tell lawyers across generations and across levels of seniority, because it's something that holds true throughout your career.
One thing we mentioned in the intro, which really had me really interested, is you started Autism Behavioral Wellness. Could you tell us a little bit about that? What is it, and what led you down that route to even begin that company?
Sure. So in 2000, I think it was about 2008, there was a bipartisan bill passed called the Mental Health Parity Act, and that required insurance companies to treat behavioral challenges and behavioral issues the same way they would treat physical ailments. So before that bill was passed, if someone had depression or was diagnosed with autism, or um, they would say, they could say, look, you're in network for a certain number of visits, and then you have to rely on out of network benefits. But if you had a broken arm, an insurance company would say, yeah, you're in network and you're covered until your broken arm is healed. So this bill, this act required insurance companies to treat both types of ailments equally. That entitled people to benefits who weren't receiving benefits before. Um, so I started advocating for these families, but I come to realize that the services that they were seeking were they, they weren't developmental. They weren't evaluative. They didn't have benchmarks that showed a child's progress. They were babysitting services. And I thought that there was a greater purpose there. So we initially launched 12 years ago a company called Autism Behavioral Services. And it was designed to provide in-home ABA therapy, but from an accessibility perspective. Because not only did we want um, to provide ABA services to families, but we wanted to make sure that it wasn't cost prohibitive. So we were Medicaid approved in network with 7 insurance companies. ABW is as well, Autism Behavioral Wellness. And it really grew really quickly because there was this need. There was a lot of ABA services, applied behavioral analysis therapy type of providers. A lot of them are private pay. And often they become very, very expensive and cost prohibitive. And if they're not developmental, if there's no parent involvement, the utility is pretty limited. When we relaunched ABS to include a wellness component, because what we wanted to do is create a more holistic approach that was really focused on the families developing healthy habits. So these children would develop into healthy adults. And that focused on physical activity, nutrition, preventative health care, as well as the traditional ABA, core ABA values. And it's been absolutely fulfilling. And just to see families strive and take these steps to enjoy time as a family unit. And so that's really, we have a couple other initiatives in the autism space, but it really comes down to advocating for people who couldn't necessarily advocate for themselves. And that's where this came from. And I think, look, as lawyers, we all have a responsibility to do that. Many of us went into the law for that particular reason. My brother has is deaf, and throughout his life, I saw my parents struggle and fight to get him the resources he needs to thrive. And I know the struggles that parents have when they're looking to provide for the family. So that's how autism, ABW came to be. And again, it was building upon something that existed, but in a way that was executed that really kind of fostered the accessibility component and really made sure there was an enhanced value proposition to the families that ultimately needed the service. So it's been a wonderful ride.
That's incredible, Scott. You sort of answered a question that I was going to ask. You talk about sort of being a voice for people who can't stand up for themselves, and then you talked about, as lawyers we have this obligation. That was really going to be my question, and I actually would like to maybe just dig into it for 30 seconds. Like, what? Say more about that. Why? It's also interesting to me hearing that you start by this conversation saying you got into the law for financial reasons. And here then you are like learning over the course of your career that there's a much deeper fulfillment that comes with the value of your law degree and applying it to a vulnerable population. Like, how deeply do you think that it's true that lawyers really should be deploying their license and their skills and maybe their resources for causes like the one that you just spent some time describing?
So it's interesting. I think that most lawyers have this desire to do so, but there are external constraints preventing them to do so. So I think many law firms cap pro bono hours. So they may be passionate about, a particular endeavor, but pro bono doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
And, so it may not count towards a particular attorney's billable hour goals. Or they really want to go to the public service sector, working for a nonprofit, but they have $300,000 in law school debt that they won't be able to pay if they take a job that is, intrinsically fulfilling, but certainly not well paying. So I think that there's a lot of people who really aspire to get to that place. And we talk about some of the other financial pieces of advice that we give young lawyers, and that's you if you have the ability and the good fortune to land a role in big law, make sure that you're living modestly, because what you don't want to do is now you're going from making nothing to, I don't even know what the starting salary is in an AmLaw 100 or AmLaw 10 firm is, 200 and some odd $1,000. Pay off your debts, because generally speaking, we talk about creating opportunity. We want to make sure that you preserve every opportunity there is to create professional fulfillment in your life. And by, I remember I used to get a kick out of, I have a parking lot in Lowenstein Sandler. So it was before the remote work environment. And, I would see brand new Mercedes and BMWs and these beautiful cars. And that's wonderful. And there were administrators that would love to see that, because now you're locked into the firm. Now you have to pay for all
Right.
those
Right.
expensive toys.
Yeah.
So it was, and I always wanted to tell, these junior associates and saying, look, now is an opportunity for you to make sure you position yourself for whatever your next move may be, even though you may not know what your next move is. So yeah, so you're right. It was a very important evolution for me personally. And I realized that there was something and I think a lot of lawyers recognize that there's something more to the practice of law than just a paycheck.
Yeah, I just to quickly validate that, Scott, I am a lawyer. I spent the last 6 years in rural Texas opening and running public defender offices. And the decision point for so many of these young lawyers is exactly what you just said. This is the work that's fulfilling, but I have so much debt and I don't know if I can really sustain this. And maybe I make some money and come back to this. But making those, everything you just said resonates with me really, really, really deeply.
It's true. And it's a shame, because you have great lawyers that would serve the public so well, but they have these barriers that have been created to really engaging in that, in a meaningful way. Now look, there are other ways to contribute. And I found that with, my passion with ABW, and then some of the other passions, and I've seen people do that in all aspects of humanity, which is wonderful. It's using our talents for something bigger than ourselves. And it's something that I teach my children. It's something that I teach my mentees. And that's a really important, point of advice to keep in the back of your mind as we go through this very, very fortunate career that many of us are blessed to have.
I want to really focus in on Omnus Law now.
Mhm.
It struck me that when I was reading the description of the services you provide, you mentioned the metaverse, and it's a term that was really thrown around the big NFT phase, and as crypto began to boom and its technology. What about the metaverse does your law firm? How does it live in the metaverse? How do you provide services through the metaverse? What does it exactly mean to Omnus Law?
Sure. So that's a great question, because, and I when I So Jason Gessing is the chairman of Omnus. He brought me on very early on to help architect the infrastructure of what Omnus Law was going to look like, and that was over 2 years ago and a little bit longer. Um, just taking a step back, so Omnus Law is a full service law firm that provides legal services to institutional clients across disciplines. So we have right now just shy of 60 lawyers practicing in 17 jurisdictions. We're launching the UK. Eventually, we're going to be launching Germany. We practice in corporate transactions, litigation, IP, and a number of industry sectors. Everyone enjoys a remote work environment by design. But when we're working remotely, attorneys can feel siloed and they can feel isolated. And our firm will never be a firm full of solo practitioners. The metaverse is our digital headquarters that allows consistency and accessibility and a platform for collaboration. And it's designed to emulate the experience attorneys have in a traditional brick and mortar office. And the way it works is this: everyone gets an avatar. Everyone in our law firm, attorneys, staff, I should say it's incredibly intuitive. It was designed by a human behaviorist. And my avatar sits in my office. Everyone gets an office. You decorate it as you like to kind of reflect your personality. I have pictures of my family and my alma mater in my office. And the challenge with a platform like Zoom or Teams is that it's very transactional. We're going to have to get on each other's calendar if we want to meet. Um, the metaverse provides a perpetual sense of presence. So what that means is that if I have a question for you, Joe or Adrian, it's like I can walk my avatar into your office,
That's
ask
amazing.
you a question in real time. We can have a conversation the same way we would if we sat on the same floor of a law firm, and then have a conversation, and then end the conversation, and I can walk back to my office or go to my next meeting. It allows a very, very seamless, natural interaction that provides for something most remote environments don't, and that's the bump-in quality. These bump-in interactions. So if I see you walking to another meeting, I can ask you, Joe, Adrian, how was your weekend? How's the family? Did you see the game? Absent an occasion for us to have a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, um, that doesn't happen. And so what you tend to be is lonely. And what we do, we have a practice group centric organization. So we have, a corporate law practice, litigation, IP, and then industry centered practices. They're all executed in the Omniverse. Now we are rolling out and beta testing our final version, I should say our third version of the Omniverse, which is what we call it. It's proprietary. We have coders and developers in house, and it's going to be relaunched to our attorneys in the summer. But it really is designed to allow attorneys to connect with others in our firm, to work seamlessly, regardless of location. There are no accessibility issues. It's a zero carbon footprint, and it allows the firm to engage in a shared services model. So whereas at Goodwin and Lowenstein, we had, IT staff and office staff and reception staff at every location, we have a shared service model that allows us to serve our attorneys quite seamlessly, but allows us to operate at a level of efficiency that brick and mortars just can't touch. So it really is the next level of practice. And I will tell you, when Jason and I launched Omnis, we were a little we were a little hesitant about how attorneys would adopt a metaverse environment. You both know law is incredibly traditional, and we didn't know how it would be viewed. It has been such the most remarkable reception to this, because it allows attorneys to connect. It allows attorneys to collaborate and interact. The whole process, our whole metaverse environment is designed to facilitate that level of fellowship and collaboration that a traditional brick and mortar or traditional remote environment won't permit. And especially now, if you think about the return to office orders, that now you get the best of both worlds. Now you have access to a traditional office environment, but you don't have those feelings of resentment and control that come with these mandatory return to office mandates.
That's such a great. I love to hear that. That sounds very innovative, and actually, it, really going into the future of where technology is going and how you can completely take advantage of it for collaboration. It's quite fascinating. Now,
Thank you.
one thing I also liked about Honest Law is your billing structure. It's
Mhm.
quite transparent and very different than what you see at traditional law firms. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What led you guys to really focus on a more transparent model instead of just like a perhaps billable hour based on whatever comes across?
What when you're building an organization, whether it's a behavioral health company or whether it's a law firm, you really have to focus on two aspects. There's two foundational aspects. One, it's creating an infrastructure that's going to allow the lawyer to survive, to thrive, right? So it's the people, process, and technology that's really going to propel them for success. But it's also the enhancement of the value proposition to the end user, to the client. So law firms traditionally uh, don't bill well. They may bill a lot, but we've institutionalized practices that allow us to communicate in real time any changes in scope of the engagement, any changes in budget, any changes in personnel handling the matter, any changes in timing of a deliverable in advance of the bill being received. Now, what this does, it allows us to partner more closely with our in-house counsel who are being, who are under immense pressure to meet internal business goals. So it allows us to help them to manage their financial goals, recognizing that legal is a pretty big spend on most in-house counsels, uh, you know, um, budget statements. Now, um, our process is really designed to minimize the friction between attorneys and clients. And we're not, look, the billable hour incentivizes the wrong behavior. It essentially, if I could do something, I have an incentive to be inefficient. I have an incentive, because, so what we do is we embrace alternative fee arrangements, anything that's going to enhance the value proposition to the client. But the key aspect of this is institutionalizing practices that really enhance the value proposition to our clients. That needs to be done. And law firms traditionally have done a very, very poor job at executing on that. Because look, I mean, I don't know. I've seen it, I've been meeting with lawyers at AmLaw 10 firms. Their rates are $2,000 an hour. I've seen an affidavit that's pushing $3,000 an hour. And at some point, the pendulum is going to swing. And I think we're seeing that now. I don't want to get in advance of the hot take, but yeah, I think that's probably getting pretty close to it.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to anticipate your hot take, but do you think that? Well, it sounds like your model then incentivizes things like using AI rather than AI coming after the billable hour. AI seems to be sort of directly and diametrically opposed to the traditional billable hour structure. Whereas it sounds like if you are encouraging a better product for a client right now, that almost necessitates the effective deployment of AI. Is that right? Is that how your Omnis considers that?
Yeah, so we're seeing more and more RFPs, requests for proposal from institutional clients that are asking how we leverage AI. Look, AI is nothing new. So, I went from shepherdizing books in the stacks to leveraging the internet. The internet is AI. We are all AI. It's this collective learning model, right? So it's just, but what it does, it's not going to replace jobs. It's not going to, dehumanize the practice of law, but it puts an additional obligation on law firms and lawyers to be even more efficient and focus on that enhancement to the value proposition to the client. That's where this comes in. So we leverage AI both in legal automation, right now from the start in terms of conflicts and engagement letters and new matter opening to our legal research and we have now look, the caveat with AI is that it has to be done ethically and responsibly, and it's no substitute to good legal advice. It's an ability to really enable great legal advice and a great legal proposition. And clients, they expect our lawyers to engage in it. They, there's, and we're seeing the other thing is that we're seeing more clients that'll go and say, look, I have this contract that I prepared using AI. Can you please edit it? Now there's a false economy there. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer editing an existing document that may or may not meet a client's business goals. Um, but clients expect the use of AI. And those law firms that are really dragging their feet are going to be left in the dust because clients are a lot more savvy than they perhaps have been, previously. So,
That is fascinating. We have talked about the billable hour multiple times on this podcast, and I've had people say it's never going to go away. And our last guest was actually mentioning how it's for sure. There's many things that have come for it, but this technology seems like it's going to be the one that's going to force value onto our clients, and really just trying to get the most value for that hour that we're using.
You're right. What's interesting is that I think that that client is right. I think, there has been this attack on the billable hour for quite some time. So if you think of what a fixed fee arrangement is, a fixed fee says, look, we're going to charge you this much money for this much work, right? For this particular project. What that requires an attorney to do is manage their leverage. Who's going to do their work? They're going to push that work down to the lowest competent cost provider and manage that process in a way that lawyers are traditionally uncomfortable managing a process. So a lot of firms get upside down on fixed fees. So, and it's been translated as fixed fees don't work. They do. They just require a heightened level of management and attention that a lot of lawyers just aren't comfortable engaging in. So I think, again, you're right. It's a different level of expectation that's placed on our lawyers, regardless of whether it's you're using a traditional hourly billable model or whether you're engaging in something that's a little more alternative.
I would love your take on if there were any attorneys, managing partners that were listening to this and are looking to really modernize their firm. What steps do you think they should take in regards to maybe AI or culture? You have a metaverse that is currently implemented. What do you think they should explore first?
It's interesting, but a lot of law firms talk about change, but are really reluctant. They may have 100-year-old anchor around their waist that is going to prevent them from being really nimble. If you're thinking about, when we think about innovation, innovation isn't an act, innovation is a mindset. So I would encourage those law firms to start their own innovation lab. And that's looking at every operational process that's manual in their law firm and seeing what can be automated. Looking at roles to see what needs to be pivoted because there's opportunity for innovation around every corner. But that requires a lot of work and that requires an investment, not necessarily of money, but certainly in time. And when you're dealing with firms that have processes that have worked for them traditionally, you're going to get this reluctance to change. And it's nice to say that we're at the forefront of innovation, but what does that mean to a lot of law firms? It could mean an enhanced tech platform. It could mean, but it could mean a new role that it's going to help. I've seen more firms with chief innovation officers and chief strategy officers, and that's wonderful. Um, but that's just the first step. I mean, it's really thinking about the leadership of a law firm and adopting more of an innovative mindset in looking at every operational aspect of the firm and seeing what can be tightened up, what can be enhanced, both from the terms in terms of the experience your lawyers have practicing law and how that's going to translate to a greater value proposition to your client.
In the model that you have, Scott, it's obviously much on the front line of innovation when it comes to a pretty traditional sector. Does that mean that you look for different skills when you're hiring? I mean, or even going sort of back even farther, do you think that practicing attorneys, like that law schools now need to sort of have an obligation to be teaching things that are a little bit more technologically advanced because those are going to be the more marketable skills that these lawyers are going to have when they enter an increasingly modernized workplace?
I think law school does a good job teaching attorneys how to think. They don't teach attorneys how to practice. And I think that when a law student is choosing a law firm, I think it's not only is it, does this firm have a great reputation, or am I going to be learning the type of law I envision practicing throughout my career? What you want to do is you want to emulate those lawyers that embody those characteristics of how you envision your practice. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, the tide is turning with client relationships and the tide is turning in terms of how to manage practices, but they don't teach that in law school. When I left St. John's, they didn't teach you the nuts and bolts on how to file a complaint or how to, how you truly answer,
Right.
but what they teach you is how to think and how to analyze a legal issue, which is really important. But as a lawyer thinking about your practice, you have to recognize that to be a disruptor, and in the practice, you really have to think about, all right, well, what am I seeing that is not working well that a senior lawyer is doing? What do I see where where can I really impact the practice and get on those committees? And that's how you're really going to be kind of at the forefront. I do think that there is going to be. I think law schools are really catching up. I think you're seeing more and more innovative classes on AI and practice management and law firm economics, which is critical. Every lawyer should understand the economics behind a law firm,
Yeah.
because we all are running, whether you're an attorney at a 2000 attorney law firm in New York, or whether you're managing your own practice. What you do has a direct reflection on the business profile of your law firm. So understanding law firm economics. So I do see that pendulum shifting as well. But I think that there's a greater play. And I think, again, we talk about being an active participant in your growth and development. I think that that's going to be important for those lawyers who, really kind of ride this next wave into the practice of law.
Let's talk about the well-being of lawyers. I think a big kind of elephant in the room of this industry is that lawyers do have a lot of burnout, right? Some lawyers are working upwards of 60 to 80 hours a week. One thing that Omnus Law does is focus on a culture of well-being for its lawyers. How do you go about fostering that, and what steps can lawyers take to make sure that they're both in a mental clarity state of mind and also able to manage their workload?
It's so important. One of the reasons why Jason founded on this is because, he saw firsthand how difficult, or how challenging the practice of law could be on well-being, personal relationships. It manifests itself in substance abuse and alcohol abuse and in ideations of self-harm. And there was it doesn't have to be that way. A lot of people feel that in order to be a great lawyer, it has to involve great personal sacrifice. And you could be committed to the practice, but at what point did it require us to give up everything else around us to thrive as a lawyer? So when we bring on lawyers, I don't set billable hours. You don't have a billable hour requirement. We expect our lawyers to be productive, but we don't have productivity requirements. We expect you to practice great law, and we expect you to enjoy a great life outside of the law. And I'm not checking, I at my first firm, bursary firm, it was like clockwork. 3 o'clock on a Friday, I'd had a managing partner come walking around to see who was at their desk. And it's just, and I always got a kick out of it. And, eh, look, there's a great way to practice law. And when we're very much a mission-based law firm, and that mission is really to empower lawyers to have a great law, to practice great law and have a great life, and take care of themselves in that process. The lawyers that we bring on typically are more seasoned practitioners who um, don't need to be micromanaged and have no desire to be controlled. And that's who thrive at our law firm. I'm not looking over anyone's shoulder. If I have to look over your shoulder and manage your practice, then we're going to have a different conversation, because, the idea here is really is to have that autonomy, um, coupled with the resources that a big law would provide, a big law firm would provide, like call coming through from the metaverse. So sorry about that. Um, yes, I think, look, we provide, it's that level of connectivity and that level of autonomy that is really critical to an attorney's well-being.
Um, Scott, you've used so many interesting words over the last 40 minutes. Grace and kindness, you're talking about empowering people, to have great lives. You're not micromanaging. There's a lot of trust there. Um, and also the creation that you've done, like the idea that you've been really purpose driven by things that you've created. If we extend that another, I don't know, however long in your life, is there a way that you want to be remembered? Is there a sort of a legacy that matters to you?
So Jason and I are doing this to really elevate the experience attorneys have practicing law. We're not, this is not going to, I think, replace a traditional big law firm or a brick and mortar. But for those lawyers that are aspiring to have something a little different out of the practice, if we if we enhance their ability to practice in a pretty meaningful way, um, and we enhance that level of fulfillment, I think we've achieved something. That's really what we're looking to do, nothing more than that. And I think recognizing, having more and more people understand, have us socialize the idea that you can have this great life practicing law and you can have this great life outside of the law. And there's more than one way to practice in a very, very meaningful way. And not only is it going to resonate with lawyers, but it resonates with clients as well. Um, there's a different path forward. So that's what I really want. That's why we're doing this. I think it's, like I said, it's very much a mission based firm that happens to be doing really well and servicing great clients. So yeah, that's what I think we want to leave.
Love that. And Scott, I would love to ask you, what do you see is next for Omnus Law or even yourself, either professionally or personally?
It's when we think about growing Omnis, it's never been a head count. It's never been a head count game for us. We've had between 2 and 3 thousand applications for attorneys to join on this. We're at almost 60 lawyers to give you that. So we're really selective to make sure that we're bringing on those lawyers who, have the same kind of spirit and vision that we do. So, I think we're going to evolve into a very large law firm, but it's not going to be at the consequence of the quality of the lawyer that we bring on or the consequence to our culture. That's going to be fundamental. And I do see us evolving internationally. As I said, we planted a flag in the UK. We're going to be planting a flag in Germany. We have an opportunity there. But I think that there are other verticals, professional service verticals, that we will be launching. And we're taking steps in other arenas, such as government relations and lobbying, on the strategies. And we're close to pulling the trigger on some other verticals that share a lot of the same hallmarks as we do in the law firm. We're also looking at launching an investment bank called Omnis Capital. It's going to service the small to mid cap market. And the idea is not only will it be a standalone investment bank, but it'll also be a funding source for those startup clients in what we call the Omnis Venture Circle. And it's going to be a great way to so I see us spreading horizontally in different verticals, as well as, growing the law firm individually. So it's going to happen a couple different ways, but, and we have a couple opportunities, to bring on, some legal process innovators and that'll really kind of enhance the experience that our attorneys and our clients are having. So that's where I see us going in the next, anywhere between 6 months and 2 3 years. So a lot ahead of us, but we're pretty measured and opportunistic in terms of that stuff. So
Scott, you've got a non-traditional model and you're very selective with your hiring. I'm really interested. Is there a question or two that are asked during an interview that are kind of out of the box questions that identify something that really matters to you in
no,
a candidate?
For me, there's no gotcha questions. I get no joy from a gotcha. When I'm speaking with an attorney, I want to really evaluate kind of really three things. One, the nature of their practice to make sure that their practice aspirations align with what we're doing here at Omnis. And I guess, and to that end, I ask, candidates if they can kind of articulate what their vision of the next chapter of what their practice looks like. That's telling, because I don't want to know what your practice looks like now. I want to know what your practice looks like in your mind 6 months from now, if you have the right platform upon which you can scale your practice. What areas of law? I think we take a very prospective look in terms of someone's practice. I want to make sure that they're a culture fit. And when I say that, I want to make sure that they want to be part of a culture, that they don't want to be just a solo practitioner, working in their home or working, at an office location, somewhere outside of the firm.
Yeah.
And then three, I want to make sure we can support their practice effectively and make sure that we can help them achieve those goals. So that's the conversation I have with lawyers. And it's really just making sure that there's mutual benefit for an attorney joining on this. But it's no gotcha. It's just, this isn't a sales pitch. It doesn't have to be. It just makes sure that there's real alignment between what we're doing and what that attorney wants to be doing.
Great. Now, Scott, we always ask this at the end, and that is, what is your hottest take on the legal industry right now?
It's interesting because I think it's twofold. I think that attorneys are expecting something different out of the practice of law and their law firms. And now, what I think you're going to see is I think you're going to see big law shrink. I think what you're seeing is that attorneys desire something quite different, and they're recognizing that there are firms like Omnus that could help them achieve their professional, personal, and financial goals without sacrificing everything and all to their law firm. And then the other aspect is I think clients now are expecting more from their law firms, more so now than ever. And those law firms that are going to be able to survive those legacy relationships are the ones that can really adapt and pivot in a way that really helps clients achieve their professional goals. So I think the law firms and the lawyers that can kind of achieve both of those kind of key ingredients will really thrive going forward. But I think that's the hottest take right now.
Great hot take.
Yeah.
Well,
This was excellent, guys. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. I don't want it to end.
of course, but we had an amazing conversation. I'm so happy you came on, Scott, truly. And I want to give a big thank you to our audience for tuning into Between the Briefs, brought to you by Steno. Special thanks again to our guest, Scott C. Pappas, for sharing his invaluable insights on the future of law, technology's role in transforming the legal industry, and its innovative approach at Omnus Law. And of course, a big thanks to my co-host, Joe Stevens, for another great conversation.
Joe, Adrian, the pleasure was mine. Thank you so much for having me. It was truly an honor.
Course.
Likewise, Scott. And to everyone out there, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and stay tuned for more thought-provoking discussions at the intersection of law, technology, and innovation. We'll see you next time.
Up next on Between the Briefs.
White smoke pours out of the chimney of the courthouse. It's really kind of amazing. I think the Vatican stole that from us. But we just had white smoke pour out last week. We just have a new magistrate judge, Brian White, in our district. We're very excited about that. There's 12 of us in San Diego, and I think it's the best judicial position. It's the most fun for sure, because we get to have a civil caseload and a criminal caseload. So we get the full spectrum of the law.
Stay tuned for the full interview coming to you soon. Between the Briefs is brought to you by Steno. To find out more about Steno and how we combine exceptional court reporting and litigation support services to deliver a superior litigation experience, visit steno.com. That's STENO.com. And then make sure to search for Between the Briefs in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts, and click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Steno, thanks for listening.